Okay, thanks for joining me. This is part 2 of this particular video of 3 total parts, and I hope you'll join me in the next part. So let's go ahead and talk about this whole, the first woman and the second woman. What happened to the first woman? Why was Adam alone in the Garden of Eden, and why was it necessary for the gods to create a helpmeet for him when in the first creation story he created him out of the clay? So what happened is that the first woman, and this is going to explain a lot of things going forward. The first woman, according to the information that is available, historical information, myths, legends, whatever you want to call it, is that the first woman was named Lilith. Now, it doesn't matter really what her name is. She appears in the Old Testament, but she's very important in the whole Hebrew history, and people believe that Lilith was just as real as Adam and Eve were, and that Lilith had been created at the same time with Adam in that first creation, and they were created equally, and the woman was not created from the rib out of Adam's side. So when it came time to become married and then to reproduce and repopulate the world, then the first woman, and we'll just call her Lilith because that's how she appears in history, right? Let's go with that. Says to Adam, I want on top. I'm gonna have sex with you, and we're gonna consummate this marriage, and we can reproduce and repopulate the earth. But I'm gonna be on top. I'm gonna ride you. Adam says, no, that's not the way it's gonna be, because I am the apex. I am the one that has a covenant relationship with Father. I have a king-vassal covenant relationship with Father. So that makes me the king and you are my queen. But I am the king, and in this king-vassal relationship, the king is the king. Just when you look throughout history, the queen was always subject to the king, even though she was always over the servants, the serfs, the military, things like that. She could have her way, but if she said A and the king said B, it was B. There was never any question about it. In fact, some kings had a rule that if the queen came in and interrupted him while he was in an important meeting without her being ushered, you can look this up in Esther, then she could be killed at that point in time. It might be, hey, I didn't call for you. Okay, guards take her out and kill her for being insolent. And so the queen was always subject to the king. And that's the way it is in God's dealing with mankind, is that it's always a king-vassal relationship, and the man is the king. So we'll see this in all this talk that all the feminazis and the feminists and the women who think they're something special, and again, I'm not misogynist, I'm just telling you the truth, want it to be different, but it's not. It can't be. It's the way it is. It's black and white. It's cut and dried. There is no getting away from it or around it. So Adam says, no. I'm apex. You are not. Now you can be secondary, and the children will be tertiary, meaning that they're third in line. But I'm number one. I've got the covenant with God, and then you submit to me. That's your covenant to me, and that's the way it works. Well, she wasn't going to have any of that. She's like, no. I've got the golden magical vagina that every man who has come into puberty wants more than just about anything else in the world. Men will do crazy things to get that golden magical vagina, the GMV, is what I'm going to call it. And she says, ain't happening. I'm going to ride you. I'm going to be on top. I'm going to be in the dominant position. Or I'm not going to have sex with you. It's not happening. So the metaphor there is, again, the man is on top of the woman, inserts into her, plants the seed in the soil, and then she, like Mother Earth, takes that seed and brings it to new life. And she said, not going to do it. And he said, that's the only way it's going to get done. So she says, no, not happening, and utters the ineffable or unutterable name of Father that can't be uttered. Harry Potter, the bad guy, had an ineffable name. Isn't that interesting how the sorcery stuff of our life seems to want to bastardize God's plan? Remember what I said, Satan's threefold plan is to prevent, destroy, or pervert. So a lot of it is perversion because he couldn't do with the other two. So he's pretty much left with perversion. So she utters the ineffable name of God, of Father, and is therefore cast out and becomes a demon. She becomes what the Hebrews, all throughout their existence, believed was a demonic entity that was going to steal their children. She had it out for the children. Now, Lilith has become the poster child for all things feminism and feminazism and women's right and all this other stuff, which is absolutely contrary to Father's plan. And we'll get into that. And it has nothing to do with misogyny. There's a lot of reasons to have misogyny if you're a male and you've been treated poorly throughout your life by women who wanted things that were not meant to be according to God's plan. And a lot of men bring it on themselves. So I'm not blaming women. I'm just saying it is what it is. But to try to make things up that aren't would be foolish and pretty much a lie. So we got to stick with the reality, the truth of it all. And so she says, no, not going to do it. She gets kicked out. So now Adam's left there all alone. So we go from Genesis 1, where we have the creation of male and female, into the second chapter where Adam's in the Garden of Eden, but he's all alone. So this time God metaphorically takes the bone, the rib out of Adam and creates the new woman, Eve, from his rib at his side. Not in front, not in back, not on top, but from the side. Now she's going to be the helpmate, right? So she is the second woman created who we find in the Garden of Eden, created from his rib, from his side, to join him, to become yoked with him, but still under the same king-vassal relationship. She is the queen, and she must submit to the king. And the interesting thing about the king-vassal relationship, and we'll get into this in a lot more detail as we go on, but the king-vassal relationship basically says that God is the king over all of his creation, and everybody else who comes to this earth from the primordial world and God's kingdom is one of God's children. So father king, mother queen, children vassals. Then when they go on and they get married, they become their own king and queen through that same relationship, covenant relationship with God, and their children become their vassals. So you've got the king and queen 1 and 2, and the children are at the third level. You look at like the European kingdoms. It's the same thing, same way. You had the king and the queen, and then you had lords and ladies and different levels of vassals. And some of those were vassals who also took on the covenant of being a covenant king to the main king. And that's why you had the main king, and they had then all the sub-states or the other areas within the kingdom where you had a lord or some other designated title who owed loyalty to the main king. Now he's a vassal, but he became a vassal king. And then he had those relationships with all of his people, whether it happened to be lords and ladies in his court, the military, or whoever it was. Then they became vassal subject to him, and he was a vassal subject to the main king, and the main king was a vassal subject to God. And that's how that worked, and that's how that worked throughout all the world, and just about every area where they had a king or an emperor or somebody who had that same similar situation, whether it was with God the Father or whether it was with the pagan gods. There was always this relationship, hierarchical relationship, that was all part of that for a specific reason, and we'll get into more of that. But in this relationship, the vassal, who becomes the man, so God's the king, and Heavenly Mother is the queen. Then we come down here, we're the children, we come to earth, and then we say, okay, each of us, or we may have a king, right? Like the Hebrews had kings, and they were subject to them. So the main king, father and mother, and their children come to the earth and take on this king-vassal relationship. So in my particular case, we'll use me. So I am a vassal king. My wife is a queen, because I'm the king, we're married, she's the queen. She submits to me as I submit to God. So I have the direct connection with God. God tells me certain things I have to commit to. If I want to have the covenant blessings, we make covenants that are blood oath covenants. And now, in order for her to receive, my wife, for her to receive blessings from God is through me. She now has to submit to me as I submit to God. And what that means is that she now has to abide by my rules. So if I say, no, we're not going to go here or go there or spend our money on this or spend our money on that, we're going to buy a four-door sedan and not a big Jeep. It's cheaper, it's more practical for whatever reason. Or the opposite, I could say, no, I want to get a bit cheap because I have stuff to haul. I got logs and different things like that I want to cut for the fireplace. Well, then she's got to go along with that in order to keep her covenant with me. So if she keeps her covenant with me, then she is blessed. If she goes against me and wants to try to rule over me, or wants to try to ride me like Lilith did with Adam during their sexual encounter that never happened, well, then that's not going to work because I get to decide. Now, part of that is I get to decide, but it should be a righteous decision. Now, if you were to ask my wife, she would tell you that, yes, I do those things. I'm a righteous man. I do what God wants me to do. I keep as best as I can all the covenants, all the commandments, etc., because commandments are basically covenants. And I do all those things. So therefore, it's easy for her to submit to me because I'm not a hard taskmaster. I don't have a lot of rules to lord over her. It's pretty simple. So by doing so, now she gets the blessings of all the things that I get blessed with, one of those being covenant blessings of protection. That's one of those things that all the vassals wanted out of a king. They wanted to be protected. So now I'm the protector. Like if something happens, some bad guy comes in, I'm the guy who runs to the door with something to neutralize the bad guy with. I remember one time we had this great big mirror that had some writing on it. And it had a picture hanging wire on it. And one of the eye screws fell out of it and the whole thing came crashing down onto the floor out by our front door. And I thought somebody kicked the door down. So she runs to the bathroom and locks the door. and I grab my protection, my neutralizer, and I head for the front door. So that was it. That's my job. I'm the protector. I got to do it. Whenever there was a problem in the kingdom, the main king had to rally all the sub-kingdoms to go to the aid of the kingdom that was being invaded. Even none of the rest of them were being invaded. They had to go provide protection. And when that happened, the king that was being invaded opened the gates of the castle, and all the peasants, all the serfs who were the vassals to the king came inside because he owed them protection. And that's how that works. So that's why the wife, the woman, has to submit to her husband, who is the king in the king-vassal relationship. Now, we're in this situation that we're in here in America with destruction and overthrow happening all around us. And it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse because we pissed away our inheritance. The United States of America is a promised land that was given to the Ephraimite Gentiles, and we've pissed it away. We've forgotten God. We've forsaken God. And one of the biggest problems we have right now is that nobody keeps their covenants. The men don't keep their covenants with Father, and the women don't keep their covenants with their men. And so therefore nobody is worthy of any kind of a covenant blessing. In fact, they're going to get the covenant curse because they've broken the covenants irreconcilably, irretrievably. And now the curse, now the penalty. You don't make the car payments or the house payments, they're coming to get it. You're out. You got nothing. So you're going to be out. And that's the problem. That's why all these things are happening. But it's way worse than that, because we've got the vast majority of women who, instead of saving themselves for a good man who's made covenants with Father, who most men have not, but instead of waiting for a good man, they're out whoring themselves around, being sleazy, and have brought even more condemnation upon themselves and upon society. So they have brought on all these additional problems that Isaiah talks about in the end times, where the women will be running the household and the women will be running their men around like they're dogs. The whole covenant relationship is completely backwards and upside down. So there's really not that many worthy men to make covenants with God. And there are even fewer women who would be willing to make covenants with men. Instead, they're like, hey, I've got the GMV. I've got the golden magical vagina. So I'm going to run roughshod over you, men in general. Forget any covenants. If you want the golden magical vagina, if you want some pussy, you got to do what I say. And you can go on YouTube and look at stuff like this all day long, and you're going to see all these women who are making all these demands, who are whores. They're whores. And the metaphor here is that Lilith refused to submit to Adam. She refused to take that covenant and make that covenant, and she wanted to ride Adam. She is, and metaphorically, these women of the world are the whore that rides the beast. So if you want to get into some revelation and what that really means, the whore who rides the beast, well, who's the beast? That's obvious. That's Satan. So who's the whore? The whore is the one who wouldn't submit to her husband and go into that sexual relationship according to the king-vassal covenant. So she said, no, I'm not going to do that. I've got the vagina, the golden magical vagina. I've got the pussy. And you can even go on Amazon. And they sell these t-shirts to women that says, I have the pussy, so I make the rules. So it's this epidemic, worldwide epidemic of women who have gone way, way, way outside the bounds of anything God would consider remotely appropriate or acceptable. So here you have the metaphor in Genesis 1 that explains the problem. And you have it repeated throughout the gospel. And Isaiah talks about it. And we'll get to that. But the result of that, the consequences of that, of what has happened, it's going to be catastrophic beyond any woman's wildest imagination. And women, especially here in the US of A, who have pissed away their inheritance and believe they're it with the GMV, are going to find out in a very, very, very sad and never-ending consequence that is more horrible than they could ever, ever, ever imagine. And the words that are used to describe it are fairly mild, because the translators, the King James translators, which is the basic translation that most of the biblical translations originate from, those guys used words that were kind of delicate, because at the time in society, in the Elizabethan society, they really revered women and tried to protect them from a lot of bad stuff. They were the protectors, and so they kept them from understanding what the reality was. But once you understand it, it's absolutely mind-numbing. And as I was learning about it, and as I came to a knowledge of these things, it was so disturbing that I couldn't sleep. There were days and days and days throughout a long period of time. And if you added them all together, it's probably weeks and months of sleepless nights, because it was just so horrible to imagine it. Well, now I've had, decades to put all these pieces together, and I'm somewhat immune to it, thinking about it. But it would be very disturbing to be around when it begins to happen. And it's nothing that you can even imagine. And so women, you feminazis, those of you who think you've got the pussy and you make the rules, who've got the golden magical vagina, and you're going to lead your husband around with a ring in his nose, you couldn't be further from the truth. And speaking to men, the word pussy comes from the word pusillanimous. In his report, Pontius Pilate's report to Caesar, he called Caiaphas pusillanimous. And that means very feminine acting, womanly. And back in that day, when men were men and women were very weak and pathetic, to be called pusillanimous was not a nice thing. And so you men that are allowing the women to control you, to wave that pussy in your face and control you with that, you are so pathetic. You are so pusillanimous beyond imagination that you would allow this to happen. Never in the history of the world has this happened like it's happening now. So grow some gonads, and you would be better off being celibate the rest of your life than having you being controlled by a woman and being what do they call them? A simp? And being a simp? So man up, grow some cojones, and be a man. And figure out what you got to do. Because I'll promise you this. If you figure out what it takes to make and keep covenants with God that gives you that covenant blessing of protection when the time comes and the destruction and particularly the overthrow begins, and you are invaded by all these strong masculine men from around the world who aren't pussies running around in rainbow dresses, stuff like that, and you've got that covenant blessing of protection, the women will be flocking to you in a way you can't even imagine. Women begging men to marry them, to take on their last name, to be married to them, not needing any money or anything else from the man, bringing their own resources to the marriage simply to be the subservient, the vassal to that king that has that relationship with Father that includes the covenant blessings of protection. So the time will come for the men, and it doesn't matter how masculine you are, you've got to be man enough to make and keep covenants with Father. And when you do, you get that blessing of covenant protection. And when all these things happen, and they will, one of the key things that women want in their life, that they're hardwired for, is protection. It's a universal thing from day one, protection. And while there is no immediate threat and we're not being overrun by enemies, then women just don't seem to care, because right now, in their minds, they've got the cat by the tail. They get to boss all the men around. They get to do whatever they want with men. And there's so many simps out there that they'll come and fall all over them and buy them things and spend money and treat them like queens. And they're the last thing from queens. The queen actually is the vassal to the king. So think about that for a minute. If you have that king relationship, that king vassal, where you're a vassal king with Father, the woman, whatever woman you marry, is going to be a vassal. She will be the queen. She will need to treat you like a king, like literally, like in ancient times. That's the scenario. It's ass backwards, completely upside down, inside out. Good is evil, evil is good type stuff right now. Men, get your head in the game. Not the little head. Get your big head in the game. Do what you got to do. If they're not willing to partner up with you in marriage, most of them won't even give you the time of day. If they're not willing to do that, you're not getting the golden magical vagina anyway. You're not getting it. They've got the t-shirt that says, I got the pussy, I make the rules. They're beating you up with that. Get your head into the game. Get your heart right with God. Make those covenants, keep those covenants, and eventually you will see women flocking to you in droves. That will be in the mindset then of playing their proper role in that king-vassal relationship. Okay, so we're going to end up here, and we'll come back and we'll start talking more about this. But it's important. I mean, here we are. We're barely into chapter 2. And I've just begun to discuss chapter 1. There's a lot more in chapter 2, and there's a lot more in this good gold that we have between chapter 1 and 2, these two creation stories. It's amazing, the mysteries that are contained herein, in stuff that nobody's ever discussed with you in your Sunday school class, or no minister has ever come out and told you this stuff here. Now, you got to get into this. You got to figure it out. But then again, if you can't believe the truth, if you're not a lover of the truth, it will be God who will cause you to believe lies. So if that's it, if you can't believe this stuff, hey, go back to sleep. because you're not going to make it. You're going to be one of the others that will be in the resurrection of the glory of the moon or the stars. And you'll be happy there. So I want to speak only to those who are lovers of the truth, who understand this, who it resonates in your heart that these things are true, and then don't trust me, don't believe me. Get on your knees and pray to Father. Learn what I'm telling you. Get this stuff, write it down if you have to. Watch this video over and over and over. But go to Father and ask Him for confirmation. And unless He doesn't want you in the kingdom, He's going to tell you through the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost is the teacher and the convincer of truth. I'm just the messenger. My motives are not to convince you. I'm not going to do it. I have no interest or desire. And that's why you're going to see throughout these videos that I'm not showing you all kinds of special effects on the screen and doing all kinds of, that just takes a lot of my time. You know, I've spent, 50 years of my life learning this stuff? So you go figure it out. I'll tell you what it is. You can go search it out and find it a lot quicker than I could over the past 50 years. But you got to put in the effort. So no, I'm not going to give you all kinds of links and resources and stuff that I've got to go through the trouble to give to you to try to convince you of something. Go do it. Show Father that you're serious. Or don't play the game. Either do it all the way or get out. Because that's ultimately what it's about. And as we go through more of the doctrine here, more of the scriptures, it's going to become more and more and more and more obvious. And so you need to decide now, are you going to be committed or not? And if you're not, okay, go do something else. Go try to, find an alternate happiness for you, whatever that is. But your happiness is not going to be with the truth, and you're not going to be happy in the kingdom of God because you'll never be comfortable there. You couldn't stand it. You couldn't endure the presence of God. You would literally burn up. So you don't want to do that. Anyway, thanks for joining in. We'll pick up on the next one. Probably back in a similar position here. We're going to be either in chapter 2, or we'll go back and discuss that whole good gold thing. I think I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. So anyway, I hope that this resonates with you. If not, hey, do whatever. If it does resonate with you, then congratulations, you're on the path to doing what you need to do to return to God and to have that covenant protection for the stuff that is worse than anything the world has ever seen. It's going to be the worst plagues, the worst famine, the worst persecution, the worst destruction, the worst droughts, the worst floods, the worst tornadoes, the worst hurricanes, the worst volcanoes, the worst, fill in the blank. It's going to be the absolute worst what's coming. So that's what you have to look forward to. So you have a little window of opportunity to prepare spiritually now. That's the only way you're going to survive. All the food and ammunition and guns and all that stuff in the world. If you owned everything in the world right now, there's no guarantee that that's going to last you more than a day. Somebody come in and take that from you. You have an earthquake and it's swallowed up. That's what happens when you have judgments of God. Things like that. You get swallowed up, right? The continent falls out into the ocean and you're drowned. Tsunami comes along and wipes you right off the map. You drown and you become fish food. So, yeah, when we're talking, I've got to try to insulate my house better because we're going to have a hot summer or a cold winter. Yeah, that's preparation, but that's preparation within your capacity to make a difference. When we get into these consequences of covenant penalties and curses, there is no avoiding that. unless you've got those covenant blessings of protection. So all these things that people are doing, you see them running around, scurrying around like little ants, trying to prepare for stuff, unless they're prepared with God and have those covenant blessings, not happening. And the thing about it is, the people who do figure it out and make those covenant blessings, those are the people who are going to become part of the 144,000 nursing kings and queens who are instrumental in the exodus out of Babylon and away from the whore who rides the beast. Remember, you're in Babylon. If you are here in America or one of our sister nations, you are in Babylon. This is Babylon. The whore that rides the beast are all around you. These feminazis who believe that they have the GMV and you have to treat them like a queen are completely backwards. They got it completely backwards. And it's not until they encounter these covenant curses that they will ever figure it out. So, anyway, lots more to talk about. Hey, if you're a feminazi and you want a badmouth, you're just helping me. Go ahead, do it. Whatever. Yeah, cool. So, if this helps you, come back. If not, good luck. Okay, this is the end of part 2. Hope you'll join me in the next video for part 3, the final part of this video.